Setsubun. Actually, it's quite appropriate. It really is. So much, you know, that when I do my research, I think I've done everything, and I realize that it's only just, as we often say, just scratching the surface. And about Uzume and her relationship to men. And she, I don't know exactly where she comes from, Uzume. Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, the vortex of heaven. Uzume, Ame is heaven. Uzu means to turn, to spiral. And the dance that is emulating Uzume, the woman, she must be barren or prepubescent girl, can dance. There should be no blood. Blood is essential, but we don't want to see it. It means there's injury. That gets really complicated. But the dancer emulating Uzume before the cave of heaven, right? So Amaterasu, the sun goddess, she was exceedingly annoyed by her brother, Susa no Mikoto. Many, many ways to spell Susa. And he comes from the Izumo area, and he was very horsey. So Amaterasu and her brother, Susa no Mikoto. Amaterasu was born from the left eye of Izanagi after he returned from the underworld, where he went to rescue his wife. There's an episode on one of my favorite television programs about, well, you have to go back further. You have to go back further. You have to go back further. And Nihongi, and what's on the cover? Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, dancing in front of the cave of heaven. Now, the reason she's dancing in front of the cave of heaven is that Amaterasu, the sun, was annoyed by Susa no Mikoto. He was doing mischievous things, as brothers, younger brothers might do. Susa was born from the right eye. Sorry, that's the moon. The sun was born from the left eye of Izanagi. Gi is the boy, the male, Gi. I have a friend in Switzerland whose name is Gi, so I always think of Izanagi is the male and Izanami is the female. So left eye and right eye is the moon, and Susa was born from the nose. I don't know how they did that. So Susa was mischievous, and he broke down the dikes that held the water in the rice fields. He flayed a horse and threw it into her weaving chamber where she was with these other ladies, and they were weaving hemp, which I thought for years was linen. It's hemp. I kept saying the wrong things. Well, the chakini is made out of linen. Some are, but hemp is the longest natural fiber, not linen. Linen is actually fairly short compared to that. Hemp grows pretty high, no pun intended. He did some nasty things, and she got really annoyed. One of her handmaidens or weaver ladies died. So she said, I'm going away, and she went into the Ame no Iwato, the cave of heaven. Ame no Iwato, that actually doesn't say anything about a cave. Ame, heaven, no Iwa, great boulder, no to, iwa no to. And to is a door. So it's actually the rock door. And her light left the world, and nobody could move the stone that blocked the entrance to the cave. Well, people have said this is actually a political takeover, has something to do with Korea. Many of the empresses of Japan were actually Korean ladies who came to the court and in Japan and married the sometimes prepubescent boy emperor to sort of rule Japan. Exceedingly complicated. So the 80 myriads of gods assembled to get her out. And that 8 number, very important about infinity in space. Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. I don't know her actual relationship. Somebody said her aunt, Amaterasu's aunt. But she thought, well, let's entertain the crowd. So she opened her garments and revealed her gender. In some writings, she shakes some eulalia, Suzuki, which is so beautiful in autumn to look at the moon. And that has turned into bells. You can see her bells. And she's also got in one hand folded paper. Maybe she's the empress or the founder of origami, but you see her little cluster of bells. And all shrine maidens ring the bells. When you are blessed by the representative of Uzume, she will shake her bells over your head, which I experienced many, many times at Ota Jinja in Kyoto. So Uzume's dancing and she's turning in this direction and that direction and this direction and that direction and then back. Well, everybody thought it was funny, or at least the record says that they laughed. Everybody laughed. And that's my favorite part. This is serious stuff. I mean, this is serious stuff. And Amaterasu found it curious too. So she rolled back a little bit of the stone and Amaterasu's light shone forth and Tajikarao, hand strength, grabbed the rock. And in many of the depictions, he's got it over his head. He's not going to give up the stone again. So she came out and the crowd was very happy and they gave her gifts of a mirror, a sword, and some curved jewels that look rather like embryos. And these became the sacred regalia of the imperial line. And in the 1960s, the mirror, which is enshrined at Izumo, Ise, at Ise, and the sword is at Atajingu, which is south of Nagoya, and the curved jewels are with the emperor in Tokyo. Yes, there was, yes. And other things as well, but these are the main gifts. And so the mirror and the sword have not been seen except by, since the time of Emperor Meiji. Somehow he said, I want to see this, but it's usually hidden in a container, a box. And in Ise, the shrines are built every 20 years. This has been going on for a very long time. There was one point where they didn't happen. I think it was during the war. And those things, which war, one might ask. And one of the problems about rebuilding is there can be no flaws in the wood. And there are no nails, and they can't just take it apart and burn it because it's sacred stuff. So when they're transferring it, they've got the twin shrines, buildings, just exceedingly lavish. In its simplicity, Shinto is so incredibly simple. And that's part of the problem. Yes. So when they are moving it, they have curtains around from one door to the other. And in the night, they move the mirror. Well, in Kyushu, near Fukuoka, in the 1960s, they found a mirror that was about this big, which they believe is the same mirror that it could be that Amaterasu gave to her grandson Ninigi to say, when you go to Japan and keep things, make things peaceful there, here's a mirror if you want to consult me. So that's the mirror. And it's called the Yata Kagami. Yata is 8 span. And this is the span between your thumb and your middle finger. Well, is that around? And it's probably around, but that mirror is about this wide diameter. So, Uzume, Amaterasu, learning that Japan was having a problem, civil war, which I guess has not abated except in some degrees, sent her grandson, Ninigi, to Japan. And she said, there is someone at the crossroads, the 8 path, the center of the 8 path, the crossroads. And there's somebody there and he's a problem. So you need somebody to go with you. And that is Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. They get to the crossroads somewhere in Japan. Everybody says, oh, it's here, oh, it's there. And there's Saruta Hiko. And Saruta Hiko, it looks a little bit like this. This is a national treasure, Fujiwara, who made this about 50 years ago, or probably even longer. He was a Ningen Kokuho, and it's made of old stuff. And these come from Saga, which is where Tenryuji is. And this is a Tengu, and that's a Buddhist little prayer hat, like somewhat like Jews wear on their foreheads. But he's quite sweet with gold eyes, so you know he's a god. Needs to do something about those eyebrows. Uzume said, I'll take care of this. So she did her dance. She revealed her gender, and he liked that a lot. Saruta Hiko. Saru is monkey, ta is rice field, and Saruta Hiko. Hiko is boy, lad, fellow, guy. And they enjoyed each other's company, and they are the beginnings, I'm looking for the word. They are the ancestors of all of the cultures of Japan. Weaving, rice culture, silk making, no, that's later on. But all the traditional arts and really the culture of Japan. Probably he was an Ainu. He's supposedly red with a big nose and hairy, and continentals, Chinese and Koreans are not hairy much. Some, yes, but probably he's an Ainu or a native of Japan, whoever was there. And so Ame no Uzume no Mikoto is enshrined at Ota Jinja in Kyoto, in the north. They don't know when it was started, but somewhere around 700, there is a record of Ota Jinja in Kyoto. And the Okagura there, Okagura is the Shinto dance, Shinto music. Kagura, ka is God, And gura or kura is the same kanji for raku. And raku is the kanji for raku is based on a kind of like a cluster of symbols, maybe not unlike Uzume's suzu. Those little bells are called suzu. It gets very complicated. So enshrined at Ota Jinja was built for the dedicated to Ame no Uzume no Mikoto and her consort Sarutahiko. Now his name, Monkey Ricefield Saruta. Well, Uzume looks an awful lot like Otafuku. This is Otafuku mask. I've had these for so long. Here's her companion, Hyotoko. I wore this to a party that was supposedly a dress-up masquerade costume party, and I was the only one wearing a costume. This was in Kyoto, and so I didn't take my mask off, and I had all my libations through a straw in his mouth. His mouth looked a little bit like an octopus, and sometimes they get together in a curious sort of way, but he otoko, a fireman, and probably in some way related to Sarutahiko. Now, Uzume, I went to Ota Jinja when I was first in Japan. I was with Sondra Castile and her girls and a group of friends there, mostly Westerners, but some Japanese. And we went to this shrine, Ota Jinja. It's a tiny little shrine north of Kyoto, older than Kamigamo Jinja, which is just a few blocks away. It's a sacred place. And I learned that Ame no Uzume no Mikoto, it was a lot of words for me to say then, even now. And I didn't know much about Sarutahiko, but I was also extremely fond of Otafuku. This is a mask. This is a mask of Otafuku, not Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. And I thought, well, you know, they look very much alike. So I went to the priest, Guji. The Guji is the head of the shrine. And I said, somewhat, well, I was a little hesitant because Otafuku is known to be rather, shall we say, forward. And she is a goddess of fertility. And I said, is Uzume Otafuku? And he said, yes. So everybody knows that. Well, she is also Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. Uzume, let's call her Uzume. Uzume is also Okame, which means tortoise. And this is a masu. And that is a mask, or at least the face of Okame. I mean, it says so right on the box. It says Okame. And this is to scare away demons, of course. I shouldn't say of course, because we put parched soybeans in there, and then we throw them at the demon of winter. He doesn't have a name, Oni. He's just a demon. And there's this misunderstanding about demons. In Japan, demons, it's really the wrong word, but maybe we need to look at what the meaning of the word demon comes from. They are powerful forces that are destructive, meaning they'll blow down your tree or they'll set fire to your house. So you have to appease them with gifts and thank them for not burning down your house. Houses traditionally always had a fire burning so that the fire god would know where to go, rather than, oh, let's try that roof of grasses over there, that thatched roof. One of the reasons why Japan, or, well, certain cultures, have ceramic tiles on the roof that are like waves. They're easy to make. You make a tile on your lap. You drape the clay over your thigh. You need practice, obviously. And then that's one of the reasons why it's arched like that, like a half of a tunnel kind of thing, because it was made on your thigh. And if you take one that's arching this way, you take another that's arching that way, so you can have a seam that the water doesn't really go up. Well, from a distance, it looks like waves of a lake. It's water, especially when it's raining. And that is often why we have water elements on as tiles on the roof, to show that it is a lake. And the great temple at Todaiji in Nara, the largest wooden building in the world, has 2 fish tails up on the roof to show that it's a lake, rather a large lake with a wave heading right in your direction. Right, fire and water, essential elements. Oh, I just found out that Sarita Hiko, at his shrines, they have fire festivals. So that's one of the reasons why I think that Hyotoko, otoko, fireman, call the fireman, that he is related in some way to Sarita Hiko. It's hard to keep these names straight. But Saruta, rice field, Saruta Hiko, and Otafuku. Her ta is the kanji for much, many, much fortune. But I kind of think that because they got related, Otafuku is a rather recent development. I think she was around probably in the, maybe the Muromachi period, something like Otafuku comes out. Okame is before her, Okame. And one of the reasons this is rather interesting about this masu, because this masu comes from Simbon Shakado. And that means the Shakado, the Buddhist temple. Shaka is another name for the Buddha. And this is Simbon Shakado. And 1,000 like sticks. They're not sure where the origin of Simbon comes from, but it's a street. It used to be very close to the center street of Heian-kyo. Heian-kyo's center is not, well, that gets exceedingly complicated. But when the city, Kyoto, when Heian-kyo was being developed, they sort of all gravitated over to the east and not so much in the west. So Simbon Shakado is, it's a Buddhist place, and they have wonderful sweets of the face of Okame, made out of soybeans. It's rakugan, it's oshimono, and they are delicious soybean. And they're in the face of Okame. So it's kind of Shinto and Buddhist at the same time, but Shaka is the name of the Buddha. Shaka is an alteration of Sakya, which was the Buddha's family name. Otafuku, getting back to Otafuku, when spring comes to Japan, which is on February 3rd, it changes ever so slightly because of the nature of the variables of the calendar, the sun and the moon. But Setsubun and Dishun, the next day, the start of spring, is a solar event. It's where the sun is. It's sort of halfway between the solstice and the equinox, like our Groundhog Day, sort of. Our Groundhog Day. And so our Halloween, people dress up, and in a way, to dispel evil spirits. Mussorgsky wrote a wonderful piece in English called Night on Bald Mountain, and it's when the spookies come out. But Hallow Eve, Hallow is sacred, reverential, admired, religious connotation. Hallow Evening, Een, which means that it's the eve of something like New Year's Eve. And the next day is Dishun, the start of spring. And start of spring also begins, which I didn't even touch on at all in this mad writing and pictures and such, is that Dishun starts the month of the tiger. So quite often in Japan, people are hanging up tiger scrolls on the start of spring, Dishun. And most of them I think don't know why, because there is this solar lunar confluence that has the tiger month, a tiger month, starting on Dishun. So, big party. Now, how do you clean house? Really, really clean house. We talk about spring cleaning. And part of that includes throwing salt in the corners. Of course, you dust and clean, you wipe. And sometimes I think great Japanese buildings are falling down because they've been wiped so much that they are wiping away the building itself. They use for unfinished wood, that's almost a misnomer. They have a silk bag with rice bran in it, which is slightly oily, ever so slightly oily. And they wipe these plain wood posts with this silk bag with nuka inside. It's one of the things that keeps them polished and closed, and as almost like a varnish, but it is non-destructive like varnish can be. They came to this idea that Setsubun, I don't know exactly how the observances we have, Japan has, about throwing beans. Soybeans are really important to the Asian diet, and certainly in Japan. If it isn't made out of rice, it's made out of beans. And rice and beans together are good companions. They found that they're better together than separately. Otafuku, not Uzume. It's the year, this is a tiger year. The lunar tiger year begins on February 1st. So we have the new year, the next day is Setsubun, and the next day is the start of spring. And I am Toshio Toko, the year man. And so I will put on my Otafuku mask and have my masu, my fortune masu of Fukumame, and I will throw them at the demon, the Oni. And I will shout, Oni wa soto, Oni out, get out. Fuku wa uchi, fortune come in. An old broom, something about a broom sweeping. A new broom sweeps better than an old broom, something like that. But out with the old and in with the new. We have that expression in English, as far as I know. So certainly was around in the time of Rikyu, because Rikyu's grandson, Sotan, how on earth did we get to Sotan? Well, he had finished, more or less, building in his grandfather's honor the yuin, the chashitsu yuin, and 4.5 mats. As you know, 4.5 mat rooms need a mizuya and they need storage space. So having a darling little wonderful 9x9 house in the woods is all very well and good, but it's not very usable, because if you have a dining room, you need a kitchen. Not always. So garden outside, the Roji garden, the garden of enlightenment, the way of enlightenment. He pondered how to arrange the stones, the stepping stones, the tobi ishi. Tobi means to actually sort of jump. We would call them stepping stones, but these are tobi. You kind of jump one to the next. And they should meander, because evil goes straight. Anyway, so you need to have a kind of meandering path, and also you have to find your way. It's not just the runway. No, you almost have to pick your way, find your way through to get to where you're going, either the chozubachi at the tsukubai or to the door of the tea house, the chashitsu. So you need a path, stepping stones. And Sotan, the story goes, sat inside the room, opened the nijiri guchi, which is the small crawling in. I can't fit it in because I'm outside the screen. About 3 feet by 3 feet, not, but sort of like that. And he sat there on the floor and threw out beans, soybeans, fukumame, fortune beans. And where a bean landed, he had a stone put. So they are called mame maki ishi. Mame, beans. Maki is to sort of scatter. Mizumaki. Mizumaki means to throw water, water throwing. Water throwing in Japan came about in part because it looks nice. Photographers know that when the ground is wet. Streets, especially with an automobile. But the roji has plants, moss. Rikyu thought that a mossy garden was enough, just moss. But people would get their tabi wet, and he thought, that's not a good idea. We need to put stones in there. Well, it's still wet. And he said, well, you should wear geta, and there are roji geta when it rains, wooden ones. But he said most people don't know how to walk in geta, and they make too much noise. So use zori, straw zori. Humble, be humble. Yes, talk amongst yourself. I need some water. I didn't realize that I needed my water. So I'll be back in just a truss. So if Sotan, using the term mame maki ishi, he certainly must have, Setsubun was certainly there at that time. They were doing it. So how to get rid of winter? Winter, we love winter. I tried to move to Florida 3 times to retire. I'm not old enough. At 84, almost 84, I'm still not old enough. It's just, it's tedious. It's the same thing all the time. Gets to be 50 and people are wearing parkas and mittens. It's so cold for them because your blood thins out. Kyoto is ideal because the winters are beastly cold and you have a piece of paper between you and the outside. Count it, a piece of paper, the shoji. Unheated, you theoretically get used to it. Seasons change rather gradually. But human beings I need to know when to do that. And so the moon was a pretty good determine it. And the sun, the sun really knows what to do or tells us what to do. So great monuments have been built to find out when these things happen, like Stonehenge, or as they say, Stonehenge. Stonehenge. I never heard it until I heard the Brits talking about Stonehenge. The tea room itself is oriented in a specific way. The Yojohan, the 4.5 map. It should, you enter from the south toward the north, and the tokonoma is in the north. Now, once you have that plan, it's like a map. And if you take a map and you move it over here or you move it over there, it's still, from your point of view, north, except traditional Japan, north is here. South is that way. So the observer of the map, the person reading the map, is in the place of deity, Polaris, where the heavens turn around, where they uzumaki, Ame no Uzume no Mikoto. That's why the tokonoma should be there. So while we're at the tokonoma and it's New Year's Day, do you realize how many scrolls you're going to use in 1 week? You have New Year's, you have Kagami Mochi. My Kagami Mochi is over there. It'll be fine, probably until next year. It's plastic. So, but inside are little mochis. Oh, and you should break the mochi, real mochi. You should break it, don't cut it, because cutting is not a good thing. So you should break it with a metal hammer, a wooden hammer, sorry, wooden hammer. Daikoku has a mallet that maybe you could use. So it's New Year's Day, and I'm going to hang a picture of Amaterasu, the sun, coming up out of the sea. Oh, the sun comes up in the east. Well, tokonoma is in the north, but if I hang a picture of the rising sun, it's the east. So that's changed the room. Now I'm in the west. I'm in the room, Yojohan, or any room, really. Yojohan is the perfect place, ideal. And so you're looking east, and now I'm in the west. We hang along willow, budding willow. In Boston, willows don't bud for months yet, even though willows are among the earliest budders, and they hang on to their leaves longer than a lot of other. And it's also identified with the River of Heaven, the Milky Way. It's thought the Ame no Iwato is part of the Milky Way. In the Hindu creation myths, they talk about the ocean of milk, which is actually the Milky Way, even though ocean of milk sounds, ooh, that's kind of creepy. Whereas the Milky Way doesn't sound creepy at all. Maybe to a little kid, like someone we know, little kids may know. But the ocean of milk sounds kind of creepy. But the churning of it, the uzu of the ocean created all these wonderful things, and gods and elephants and many things. So the willow has healthful benefits and is associated with Kannon. Kannon is the goddess of mercies. We got all these gods and goddesses running around. They're influences. The sun, to call it a goddess. Japan is one of the few cultures that identifies the sun as female and the moon as male. Kind of interesting, because in fact, their very natures are opposite. A globe, sphere, a ball is symbolic of water. And water has no form, no specific form. It can take any form. But the earth, which I think people knew, even though science says that the globe of the earth is a cube. So it seems that symbols are the opposite of that which they are symbolic. Pyramids, fire, pyramid, fire. 3 is a very stable structural form. So now we've turned the tokonoma around. It's now the east and we're in the west. I have seen at Urasenke, because they have lots of rooms with lots of tokonomas and also a wakidoko, a side tokonoma. In a large room, often it's a large room, there is another area of that north wall that may have a bell hanging in it, a gong hanging in it. It may have cabinets near the floor. It could have shelves. It's called a wakidoko, a side tokonoma. And if there's enough room, you hang for the new year a spray, a bunch, as I called it, of club moss. And club moss looks like an evergreen. And I guess club moss is a kind of evergreen, but it has little seed pods that have, or spore pods that have what look like little mallets. Yeah. So that is called kami dasuki. A tasuki is a long band, soft band that you tie around your shoulders and to hold your sleeves back when you're doing some work that your sleeves will get in the way. And the kami is God. And when Uzume was doing her dance, she pulled back the sleeves of her garment with kami dasuki, club moss. It's hard to make this stuff up. It is so charming, so charming.